Hey everyone, welcome to our show. Today we'll be talking about some of our watches, how we got into them, and why we love watches so much.
A little bit of a teaser of what's to come, but my name's Julian.
My name's Andrew.
My name's Joseph.
I guess today we're just going to talk about, why we got into watches, specifically timepieces.
The purpose of the show is really just run you through, if you're starting out just like us, why you're getting into watches, what things you want to look for, and why is it fun? Why is it important? Why is it not a waste of money?
It's never a waste of money.
It's a big waste of money. But anyways, let's get into it.
I guess we'll talk about like what we have.
Yeah, let's start with we'll start with Julian. He's the latest to our to the addition of our watches, our watch collection. So this would be Julian, your first.
So yeah, this
watch.
is my first watch here. So I have the Black Bay Black. So it's the out of movement, not the current in-house movement. So I kind of like to think it's part of history, right? It's a collector's item. I seriously love this watch. When I first saw it, I told you, I was like, oh my god, okay, maybe one day. And then just one night, I just texted Joe saying, I just need to get this. And at that time, that was right when I guess it was really popular, right before they changed it over to the in-house movement. So, we just called around and saw who had it, who didn't have it.
It was literally on the truck. Haven't left the truck yet. We called and they're like, okay, there's only one, please put my name on it.
And then I took that as a sign, and then there I was committed to it, and I haven't regretted it since. I was looking at different watches, right? But for whatever reason, I really like the design of this. It's a very classic watch to start off with. It's part of the Rolex, I guess, family. It's not a Rolex watch, but it's a Tudor, so it's a sister brand. So they share some of the, I like to think, the quality control. And boy, I've been really happy with it. It feels really solid in your hand. The dials just turn, you hear that click.
It's a quality click.
It's a quality click. Yeah, I really love it.
If we can take a step back, can you tell everybody how you got into watches? What was your motive for even being interested in watches in the first place?
Yeah.
Was there someone who influenced your decisions?
I think most people can relate to this, that you're either, you start off looking at watches as possibly something that's a little bit ostentatious, maybe not something that if you're a practical person or you're someone who's a young professional, that's something you might not get into or not get into yet, or something of an older sport. But in this case, everyone needs to make that transition earlier or later. Everyone has to go through that phase of thinking it's a waste of money, waste of time, it's maybe a show-off piece, to becoming really nerdy and interested into the little aspect, the rich history of watch collecting.
So watches, for the longest time, it wasn't really something that really interested me in terms of like wearing something on my wrist. I just didn't find the allure in it. But as I grew older, watches naturally gravitated towards me. It wasn't up until, I guess, you, Joe, when you first were interested in acquiring your first watch, that you really spread that enthusiasm onto your friends. Get in there and really examine the history of these pieces. For example, with the Omega Speedmaster. So that watch was the first watch to go on the moon, and that's a pretty big deal. So that was one of the reasons why I was really interested in that. And then I started researching a little bit more. I was like, I don't know if I can really commit to spending that much towards an item, right? Because there is sticker shock at first when you're looking at it, right? But then you realize, right, that these watches will essentially outlast you, right? And you can pass it down to the next generation and the next, and you can stay within a family for generations. Yeah, it just. When I saw it, and then I just got interested in it, and then you made the phone call, and there was just one left on the truck. It just all signs pointed towards saying yes, and just
ended up getting it that quickly.
Ended up getting it that quickly. Yeah.
It went from let's see who has it, and then 45 minutes later we're at the store, and this guy accidentally got overhyped.
I had a pretty big smile on my face when I first tried it on. I've been very happy with it since the purchase.
How have you been using it?
Been using it as my daily, just basically every day. Not as much on the weekend. Usually just wearing it when I go out. I try to wind it every day, but I find that with the Power Reserve, I don't have to, because as you wear it and you walk with it, you do some movement with it, it actually recharges the battery.
Yep.
So I actually don't have to wind it every day.
Yeah, so start with the good.
Yeah, start with the good and then.
So I'm next in line. I started off liking watches many years ago. I think at first, I've always knew that my grandpa, he's always been a pretty serious Rolex collector, so I guess it's always been at the back of my mind, sort of in the family history. It wasn't until one day where I was on a cruise, I had nothing else to do but to go shopping, so I went into a watch store. I found this Tag Heuer. At this point, I had very little knowledge in watches, but I really did like the design. I really liked the way it looked. So essentially I fell in love with it. So although some would say it's not the smartest purchase with watches that I've made, in my opinion, it was a really good choice. It's what started my watch addiction. Essentially, that's what opened me to this whole watch world. After buying this Tag Heuer, what I did is I started following even more watch channels on Instagram. And all these watch channels led to more and more. Over time, I discovered this watch here, which is the...
So just to update you, Andrew's first watch is the Tag Heuer.
Sorry, the Aqua Racer.
The Aqua Racer. It's not here today. We forgot to bring it, but
show it to you guys later.
Yeah, eventually Andrew bought the second watch.
Yeah, which is this Longines Legend Diver. This is actually based on a watch made in the 1950s, so it's a remodel. What caught me to this watch at first is on Instagram. I would see many different profile shots of this watch. One of them being the
beautiful
profile.
This profile where you really do see this protruding glass coming out.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah, and you'll see these as well. But I find the way the glass protrudes is very unique. Not many watches have this type of profile, so that's what drew me into it at first before knowing anything about this watch. So what I really love about it, obviously, is the profile. As you dive deeper, the next thing I fell in love with is the way the bezel turns. Unlike many dive watches where you turn the bezel like this, like on the Black Bay, you actually unscrew this top crown. As the top crown is unscrewed, you can then move this, and it moves the bezel, which is inside the watch. So from a geeky perspective, this is pretty cool. At least to me it was, exactly. Yeah, because I've never seen that on a dive watch before.
That's nice.
So let's put this back. And here it is. So this is the Longines Legend Diver. It took maybe less than a month for me to decide to buy something like this. After talking to Joe and Julian here, they convinced me to buy it in pretty much 1 week. And here it is.
I think to speak a little bit more about it, I remember the first time seeing it on a photo and thinking, man, the patina on the timer, on the digits, reminds a lot of the old kind of age vintage watch.
Exactly.
Which is something quite rare to come by today in new watches. So I think there's a little bit of history with the historic design cue that's embedded in
very
this
retro
design.
Exactly.
Very classy.
So before I started getting to know more about even the movements inside this watch and just movements in different watches in general, what I really liked about this watch was the styling. So with this watch, you can dress it up or you can dress it down. You can wear it on a very casual day where you're just wearing shorts and flip-flops or in a suit. So in that sense, it's very versatile. You can really wear it in different environments.
You've taken it on vacation, right?
Yeah, I've taken it everywhere. Yeah, it's
people recognize it. Huh?
Yeah, exactly. When you get watch people, they instantly know what this is. When you don't encounter watch people, they either really don't see it, which is sort of cool in a way, or they find the design to be pretty unique, which is also quite cool. After getting into this watch, then I really started nerding out on the history of watches. Not only the history of watches, but how watches are made, how actually complicated movements are. Some would even argue that it's harder to make a movement in a watch than it is to make even a modern day car. Because if you open up this watch, keep in mind these are mechanical watches, not ran on battery power. So when you do open up these watches, you'll see thousands and thousands of essentially tiny movements that you need, tiny parts that you need a microscope to look at, exactly. And when you think about how these movements are actually put together, and then at one point the watch is finally brought to life, that's pretty amazing itself. So if you're the kind of person who likes to geek out on these kind of things and appreciates fine engineering and whatnot, which I like a lot or enjoy, then I think you can really enjoy these kind of watches.
Yeah, I know that in a Rolex, the process from kind of excavating the metal to then putting all the watches together sometimes takes more than a year. There's a lot of manpower put into it. Everything's handmade, right? Yeah, it's quite a really cool, interesting process. A lot of love put into it.
That's right.
So dive watch, Joe?
Well, okay. I'm wearing the Tudor Black Bay, the original in red. This is not my first watch. This is the second watch. Let's talk about my first watch though.
Magic.
So this little guy here. So I got into watches maybe not too long ago, but I got into watch because of Andrew. He sends me a lot of photos over the phone, and he's always asking for my opinion on watches. And then
pretty
I decided,
much forced him to buy a watch.
Yeah, practically. And at that time I had no real form opinion on watches, but I did know that I like watches and I love design. So eventually I follow up, and I don't want to be uninformed, so I just want to look into what watches are all about, which brand, why, and what's good about it. And then I got really into the technical aspect of watchmaking. I looked into how a watch is put together, which company does what with it, what's the history of a certain brand. So let's say, a Rolex sub, which model is considered to be the one that's most wanted. And then I really got into, so like James Bond wore it, and then it was in the 60s and the red sub, and so I fell in love with history, right? All the history of all the watches. And then you just like a deep dive into it. You just get addicted. So you go from one watch to another, from one brand to another, from the Rolex to the IWC to all these other brands. And then there's no thought of buying my first watch at that point, but eventually the hunger kicks in after looking at all of these, after window shopping so much. And then I decided, okay, it's time to get my first watch. And I wanted something a little more fun. I didn't want anything serious. I wanted something in color, and I did like the chronometer on the chronograph on this guy here. So this guy is originally the Tudor Monte Carlo, and then it was re-released in 2013, I believe, now called the Chrono Blue. And it just harkens back to its original heritage in the racing world. So you have your pusher here, your motorsports pusher here for the lap time. So start, end, it's a timer, and then also you can dive with it up to 150 meters. You have your indicator here. You can have your indicator here. You can set your dive time. You can use it as a dual time zone. So the bezel is quite versatile. But I just really love the blue with the NATO strap. I just love the colorful aspect of it, and I think it's a little bit unique.
So unique.
Yeah, and for the old head who love watches, they may not recognize this right away, but it's kind of cool. And then for the people who aren't so into watches, I think it's just a nice, fun, colorful piece. So that was my first watch.
Actually, I'll just interrupt and plug in something here. What was your feeling when you first got the watch and you first put it on?
Oh wow, unreal. I don't quite know how to put it into words, but for someone who have never thought about owning a watch to having to put down a lot of money to wearing a piece of watch, and then at that point you realize, it's not really the money doesn't, and then the expenses you don't get wrapped up into it. You just get wrapped up into the fact that you're wearing something that you've admired for so long, and it gives you a really good feeling, and it makes you feel like, you know, you appreciate something that's on you, that's physically on you. So there's a sense of appreciation for yourself there. So I think that was really cool. And then on top of that, like Julian was saying, you know, is this something that will outlast you? So I really feel like with this watch, especially this fun one, that I could hand it down and eventually it'll increase in value. And then, you know, at one point it will be looked upon as, you know, that as like a really cool piece within the family, right?
There's always that first time you do get your first nice watch and you put it on. The second you have it on your wrist like this, it's just, it's a feeling that you really can't fathom or describe. It's just a very fascinating feeling. Yeah. Obviously a very good one. And then, yeah, so.
I think it's fun too because I have, you know, these guys and it's like a brotherhood. Every time we see each other, we always look at each other. So we're just like, good job. And just to ourselves, we like to sit there and take pictures of our watches. It might be a little bit obnoxious, but to us, it's just all part of the fun. You share something, so.
And it's also a good feeling knowing that although, yes, buying watches like these kinds of watches, they're definitely not cheap. They can only get more and more expensive. It's good to know from a price point that you're buying something that doesn't depreciate like the average car. In fact, over many years, most of them actually appreciate in value if you make the right purchase.
I can speak for a fact that some of my watches have appreciated in value because I acquired my second one used, and it's really gone up, especially with the new releases.
So not only are you enjoying a fine piece of engineering, but you're not losing money in a way while enjoying the watches at the same time.
I was going to ask, has this been updated? The Heritage watch?
No, it's still. So there's a black version, but the blue has been kind of controlled in its quantity, and they haven't released an iteration since. I think with Tudor, the Chrono line are a little bit more exotic and fun, and then you have your Black Bay, which is the equivalent of the sub, which they refresh every year or so. But they try to do it in a way where the previous model isn't replaced, but it's becomes a little bit of a unique collector or something that is still relevant. It's just a different styling. But
fresh. But yeah, so I guess now we can talk about some of the things that we don't really like about them or we wish could be better.
There's something you don't like about your watch?
I'll start with myself.
I don't know.
So I started noticing about 2 months ago, and I bought it a year ago now. My watch would actually speed up the time. So it was actually quite faster than it should be. But you know, things can go wrong, and that's fine.
Do you know how many seconds?
It was running about maybe 5 seconds too fast per day. Because when I brought it to Howard's, where I had purchased the watch, so they had deconstructed it, and one of the technicians there had looked into putting it on the machine and had seen that, hey, there's something definitely wrong here. But it was a quick fix. He just had to do a little fine adjustment to the mechanism. And he gave me a kind of like a small diagram of, because depending on which position the watch is actually on, either 12 o'clock down, the face down, all these gyrometric positions, the watch can actually speed up or slow down.
So why is that? Wouldn't your power reserve kick in at that point and maintain it?
I think it's more than just the power reserve at that point. I think it's just because the watches are machined to be accurate within a certain tolerance level at whichever position it might be at. So because it's on your wrist, usually you're going to be having it, I guess, the crown facing downwards for the most part if you're walking.
Dangling your arms.
Dangling your arms, right? But sometimes, if you're putting it on your desk, your crown will be facing perpendicular to down. Or just all these different positions affects the speed up or slow down of the time. And for a reason, the total average of mine was causing it to be positive. So it would be faster and faster. Usually one position would be slower, the other position will be faster. So the average should come out to essentially a net zero. But mine was a little bit too fast. But I brought it in, the technician explained this all to me, and he just did a quick fine adjustment. And ever since then, it's been keeping maybe plus or minus 1 second per day, which is perfect.
That's within tolerance, right?
That's better than
just to add to that. You know, if you're concerned about your watch accuracy, there are apps on the App Store that you can download, and you can mark your measurements throughout the day, and then it'll tell you exactly if it's within the norm or not.
Time.gov, is that your homepage?
It's on my homepage, but I use it.
Yeah.
In case you guys are wondering, time.gov, that is essentially a clock, just like you have everywhere, except this clock is synced to your nuclear time.
Yeah.
So if you are very OCD with things such as your second hand even being in sync with the nuclear time, then you should check out.
I give up on that. Now I just look at a watch estimator, like, okay, that's fine. For the first year or so, is like, gotta sync it to
right.
Guess on to me. Yeah. So with this watch, I wouldn't say there's really any negative that I've found so far. Obviously, you're going to have, of course. Obviously, you're going to find, just like any mechanical watch, you will not find a perfect mechanical watch in terms of timekeeping. There's always going to be a tolerance. Over time, it will lose some seconds throughout the day or week or month or whatever. But you're not buying these watches to have accurate time. I mean, they are very precise, actually extremely precise.
You are buying them for accurate time.
Exactly. So that was a wrong statement.
It's probably the most accurate timekeeping.
If you wanted a watch that would keep track of your seconds and you wanted it to be super accurate every single day, then you'd obviously be buying a digital watch. But that is not the primary reason why you buy these watches. There's many other reasons. So I wouldn't say that's a negative, because that is something you should expect when buying a mechanical watch. The only negative I have here would be not the watch itself, but the strap. Maybe this is just normal wear and tear, but I find that this strap here, this is where I always use it because my wrist doesn't grow or get smaller. So I always use this hole right here, and over time I just find the wear to be...
How long have you had this watch?
Exactly, only a little over a year, and I find that this
is their second strap though, right?
Actually, I'll get into that in a second. I find that this wear is too fast for something that I've only worn for maybe a little over a year. However, I did contact Longines, the headquarters, and they were very nice. After just one reply, they sent me a brand new strap, free shipping. They didn't charge me for it. I'm assuming it's because it's under the warranty period still. So I now have a new strap at home that I have not installed to this watch yet. But yeah, that's cool. Really my only criticism. Aside from that, very happy with this watch. Brought it underwater. Does what it's supposed to do. Yeah. Didn't break.
Exactly.
Good. Yeah. So far, it's still a desk diver. Haven't really done real scuba diving, which is what this watch is also meant to do. Yeah. But no, it's been very reliable. Very sad to say, I did drop it a few times, but haven't noticed any time loss or negative in timekeeping. So.
Yeah. It hasn't really scratched or dented or anything.
No, just the only scratches I have are the very fine micro scratches, just like you sort of have on your bracelet, but around the edge of the watch, so the casing. I think that's expected, especially if you're going to be wearing a watch every day. No matter how careful you are, you're always going to, that one time by accident, you're going to scrape it on something. But again, just like Julian said, I find it does add character.
Yeah. So. And these, the front face elements, so sapphire glass, I believe, right?
Yep.
Not a scratch on mine. And again, this is just not really caring about anything. It's been rock solid.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I'm a little bit different. I'm a little bit more reckless. I think these two, as I know them, they're very, careful with their materials. And I'm not so much. I'm a little bit more impulsive when I always have a watch on me, so either one of these would be on my wrist at all times, and I wear them to all my daily activities. I've taken this guy to rock climbing, and I've scratched this piece right here, quite a big scratch on there somewhere. Right here, and I wear them to the gym. I do all sorts of activities with them, and I kind of like that. I kind of like the idea of that. Anything I do when I'm having fun, these guys are there, and if they happen to get a little nicks here and there, little scratches, it all adds to my history with the watch. So I enjoy that. I'm not too concerned with scratches. I actually enjoy them. With this guy here, I want to get to kind of the simple joy of wearing the watches in the morning. With this guy, I wake up, and before I had the other watch, I had to wind it, and then and then make sure the calendar is correct and everything's good. And I love the winding of it, so I think that's fun. And then I got my second watch, and then so I chose to wear this as my work watch. So the work week, whenever I'm working, I wear the Black Bay Red. And then on the weekend I wear this, and because I only wear it on the weekend, I had to constantly change the date, the calendar date, and that process is a little bit tedious.
It's complicated?
Yeah, it's not complicated, but it's a little bit tedious, especially with when you pull out your crown and the interval between each settings. You have to pull it once or twice or this and that. It's not quite as precise as I would like it, and when you wind it, there's not like in the Black Bay, there's a lot of resistance, so you know when you're winding your watch. And these ones, these settings where you would wind the time doesn't offer that much resistance, so you can't really tell whether or not you're in the right settings. And you always have to double check, you always have to pull back and forth a little bit. That annoys me just a little bit, but you know, after getting used to it and living with it, you have a feel for it. But that's really it.
I think we can always do actually another video just to show how a mechanical watch, I mean, you can just wind it however you want, but you could risk damage to your watch if you're not winding it properly.
Especially when you have a date movement in it.
Exactly. Right. So I think a lot of people have
procedure that you have to follow, right?
A lot of people who have mechanical watches, I don't believe that they actually wind it properly, which again could risk damage to your very beautiful timepiece. So we can always do a video just to sort of explain how, just very basically, how a watch works, and how it should be wounded so you don't end up damaging your watch.
Because you want to do at least the time first or second, depending on which of the watch, right? And then wind for the power.
Exactly. But if you want something just, if you're in it just for the fun, because I really enjoy winding a watch in the morning, taking a moment before putting it on my wrist, just winding it up, and just. And before your coffee, just sitting there, you know, counting to 30, okay, all right, and then putting it in, and then looking at the time, and then setting it. I think that's a part of my daily routine.
It's part of the enjoyment of having these kind of watches.
Yeah, and if you don't want to risk too much about damaging your watch, try to get something that doesn't have the date movement yet.
Okay, so we've talked about our history, what we like, what we dislike. Let's now talk about our future. What's next? What's in store for us? So for me, I've had my eye on, since that night we went over to ours for their open night, I put on the Rolex Datejust 2 41 millimeter onto my wrist. It was the 116334 reference number. I know it by heart now. Blue color for the face, fluted dial. Wow.
Beautiful.
It's just gorgeous. And the way it catches the light and just sparkled, I was, I just knew instantly. That's really what I'd like to as my next one. This one, you know, it's a very classic sub-like feel or look to it. Black, the gold inserts, very classic, right? You're perfect as a daily, but for my next one, I'm looking for a little bit more color. And blue, I really like that color. So I think my next one will definitely be that one.
Can't go wrong with the Rolex.
Can't go wrong with Rolex. And it's part of we're still keeping in the family Tudor going into Rolex, but
great.
How about you, Andrew?
So for me, it's my next watch. I already know what brand I'm going to end up getting. There's so many different watchmakers, but there's something about Rolex. So it's going to be a Rolex, and the Rolex that I've really enjoyed so far, that I think I will be getting next, is the Rolex Air King. Ever since they reintroduced it, there was a period of time where it was discontinued. Now they've brought it back. It's been back for maybe several years now, but the Rolex Air King. The two watches I already have right now, they are dive watches, right? So I think it's time to deviate away from dive watches and try something a little bit different, with the steel bracelet, with a real Rolex movement. So the Rolex Air King.
But I do know that for a while there, you were convinced that your next watch would have
been a Panerai?
The Panerai. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So Panerais are also beautiful watches. There's many beautiful watches out there. I just think it's nice to just have a Rolex in the stable before going forward. Maybe it's a psychological thing, but I just really want a Rolex.
Forbes #1 branded company.
Brand identity is quite
Actually, yes, Forbes just named Rolex. Actually, Joe was showing us earlier today. Rolex is actually named #1 by Forbes for the most reputable company in the world. Yes.
In terms of consumer perception.
Exactly. Yes.
So your perception
Exactly.
at scale.
Yeah. Exactly.
So Rolex. Joe, would
For me, it's the brand doesn't really matter as much. I mean, the brand matters a lot in terms of its history in watchmaking, its commitment to it. But other than that, I think I like to have a spirit with on my watch. This one kind of was a lot of fun. It's a race watch. I felt I needed something young, something vibrant. And then with this one, I wanted well, when I was getting this one, I was considering this guy, and then I communicated with my rep Don at Howard, and he knew how much I love the two watches. So when this one came, I had a really good deal at use. I just jumped on it. Yeah, so with this one is it's a dive watch, so it's a sport watch. It's not a dress watch. I don't want to dress watches yet, but it's fun. It has a little bit of color into it, and it has so much. It bears so much resemblance to the sub. But also has its own identity, so that's why I loved it. And then my next watch, I figured I want something that embodies a little bit of my traveling adventure. I love traveling, I love doing backpacking, I love exploring. So I settle on the Explorer.
Beautiful.
Right? So it's just that spirit.
Yeah.
The Explorer has been around for a while. It has a long history in that space. But other than that, it's just that the embodiment of whatever it is that you want to feel like when you're wearing that watch. So that's the guy that I'm eyeing next.
So it seems like, right, like you said, Joe, the embodiment. So the way it makes us feel special.
Yes.
In a nutshell.
Rolex.
But Rolex, sure, but I think at one point there it would have been the IWC.
Yes. The Big Pilot.
Either the Big Pilot's quite expensive, but yes, either the Big Pilot or the Portuguese or Portugieser. So one of those two. They're beautiful.
But it's fair to say, even if all of our next watches is Rolex, it doesn't mean that the buck stops there, right? It's just one.
It's a never-ending.
It's a progression until.
And it changes every day.
It changes every day.
I know. Like this morning, I was thinking about the Cartier tank. I really want a dress watch. Yeah. It's been a favorite of mine for a long time.
Relatively, we are still new to watches.
But this is our experience.
Exactly. So if there's anything you wish to add, please let us know. If there's any type of feedback, valuable feedback, we'd be more than happy to hear that from all of you.
Yeah, I think we're coming from the space of, we got into watches recently, and we're exploring, and we're giving you some of the reasons why we like it. And, we're still very green at it. The enthusiasm is there. So sharing it with you and letting you see that progression, because I think a lot of the time it's intimidating when you're watching all these watch reviews and everyone talking about watches.
So I have no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah, it's quite technical, and they seem like you really have to know a lot to get into this space. And, we don't know much.
So hopefully this video can sort of dumb down those videos a little bit, just to someone who's looking to get into watches and maybe understand a little bit more just from that aspect. And hopefully one of our objectives of this video as well is to help push you over that cliff and get you into your first nice timepiece. So thank you for watching this video. I know it's been a long one, but thank you for your patience and hope you enjoyed it. This is Andrew here, my friend Joe, and my friend Julian. See you next week.